The sun filtered softly through the stained glass windows of Fountain of Glory Ministries in Nsukka. Outside, palm fronds swayed in the breeze, and talking drums beat gently in rhythm with the day's celebration. Inside, lace shimmered, and perfume hung sweet in the air. It was the wedding day of engineer Chibuzo Obi, a man many in the community respected and had quietly prayed for since tragedy visited his home 2 years ago. Dressed in a flawless white agbada with golden embroidery that glinted under the lights, Chibuzo stood proudly at the altar, flanked by his best man and smiling through a calm joy. Aunties fanned themselves with Ankara handkerchiefs. Church sisters whispered behind their fans. "Finally, he has found peace," one said. Among the front rows stood a small girl in a delicate yellow satin dress. Amara, Chibuzo's only daughter, held a tiny white box in both hands. It contained the wedding rings. Her braids were tied at the ends with white beads that clicked when she moved, and a soft silver necklace, her late mother's, hung around her neck. Her father glanced over and whispered, "My Ada, you look beautiful." "Thank you, Papa," she replied, with a smile so small it almost didn't make it to her lips. But her eyes were wide and searching. While everyone else celebrated, Amara watched the doorway, watched the altar, watched everything. Because something didn't feel right, her fingers clenched the ring box tighter. Then the music changed. The church choir's voices rose in a new key. Ululations rang out. Ushers moved to open the double doors. A hush fell over the room. Remy Adagoki stepped in. She glided into the church dressed in an ivory gown with shimmering adder patterns woven in lace. Her skin glowed, her veil shimmered, and her smile lit the room. Phones came up. A soft wave of admiration swept through the church like warm wind. "She looks like royalty," someone whispered. Amara blinked. Her chest tightened. She watched Remy take each step slowly down the aisle, confident and graceful, waving gently at guests, pausing slightly to squeeze a child's cheek. The perfect bride, the dream stepmother, the new woman in their lives. She reached Chibuzo and took his hand. The church swelled with emotion. To everyone watching, it was a beautiful scene. But not to Amara. She wasn't looking at the gown, or the veil, or the way her father smiled with tears glinting in his eyes. She was looking at Remy's face, and what she saw made her stomach twist. Because behind that radiant smile, there was something cold. A flicker of calculation, a look too perfect, too staged. Amara couldn't explain it, but she had felt it before. At home, in moments her father never saw, in the silence behind the laughter. She swallowed hard and shifted her weight. Her grip on the ring box tightened. Her eyes did not leave Remy's face. Her mind drifted, not to the wedding, but back in time. Back to a small wooden chair by the window. Her mother's chair. Before Remy ever wore the ivory lace gown or smiled down an aisle filled with flowers, there was silence. A deep, heavy silence that hung in the Obi household like smoke after a fire. It began 2 years ago, the day Mama Ioma left and never came back. It was a Sunday. Amara remembered the faint scent of yam porridge and the way her mother adjusted her wrapper as she tied her headscarf. "I'll be back before you finish your drawing," she had said, leaning in to kiss Amara's forehead. Amara smiled and waved from the step, holding her red sketchbook in her lap. That was the last time she saw her mother. There had been an accident, a sharp bend near Ogige Market, a reckless driver, a shattered windscreen. A phone call, then a scream from Uncle Abuka in the backyard, and after that, the silence. Amara stopped drawing that day. The once lively home lost its music. No more humming in the kitchen. No warm hugs after school. No prayers before bed. Just Chibuzo moving through the house like a man underwater. He ate less, slept less, and when he spoke, his words came late and dry. At just 7, Amara began to pack her own school bag. She learned to fold uniforms, warm okra soup, sweep the parlor before her father returned from work. No one told her to grow up, but someone had to fill the spaces her mother left behind, and so, quietly, she did. Then, one rainy Thursday evening, Remy appeared. Amara returned from school soaked at the shoulders, only to find a woman sitting in Mama's chair by the window, laughing. Her heels were kicked off. Her handbag rested comfortably on the center table. Chibuzo stood nearby, holding 2 cups of tea, like a nervous host. He cleared his throat as Amara entered. Maeda, meet Auntie Remy. She's a friend. Remy smiled wide. You must be Amara. What a beautiful girl, just like your daddy described. Amara forced a smile and nodded, but something inside her tightened. That chair, Mama's chair, no one sat there, not even Shibuzo. Seeing Remy in it felt like someone had redrawn the lines of her home without asking. Still, she said nothing. Remy kept coming back, with gifts, shiny hair clips, strawberry-scented lotion, pencil cases in pastel pink. Amara said thank you each time, but she never used the lotion, never wore the clips. She kept them in a drawer, untouched, like pieces of someone else's story. Then one Saturday morning, Remy came with a suitcase. Chibuzo carried it into the guest room with an awkward smile. She'll stay for a few weeks, just until the wedding. It makes sense. Amara nodded. Again, she said nothing, but inside the ache grew louder. That night, the dinner table held 3 plates. Remy served steaming rice and sweet, caramelized plantain. Amara, sit up. A lady doesn't slouch, she said, lightly tapping the girl's back. Her voice was sweet, but not soft. Not like Mama's. Chibuzo laughed. You see, she's already helping. He looked at Amara like he was begging for her approval. Amara chewed her food slowly and kept her eyes on the plate. She didn't know how to say what she felt, that something was out of place, that something wasn't safe, that this woman wore smiles like clothes, easy to change. She slept late that night, lying awake with Mama's necklace tucked under her pillow, her sketchbook untouched at the foot of the bed. Something was shifting in the house. She didn't have the words for it, but her heart did. And the next day her heart would begin to prove it. The days that followed blurred into a quiet routine. Remy cooked. Remy cleaned. Remy laughed loudly whenever guests were around. She became the woman everyone admired. Chibuzo has found gold, the neighbors would say. That woman is graceful. Amara heard it all, but she also saw the other side. At first, it was small. A sharp glance when her socks didn't match. A cold silence when she forgot to greet Remy first. A whisper that felt more like a warning than a correction. You should know better, Amara. You're not a baby. But Chibuzo never saw it. In front of him, Remy's voice turned warm again. She ruffled Amara's hair in public. My baby girl, she'd say. She's the light of this house. Guests would smile, and Chibuzo would beam with pride. Amara learned quickly. Remy wore 2 faces, one for the world, and one for when the door closed. So she began to shrink, pulling her joy in like a turtle. She stopped leaving her drawings on the table. She stopped talking about her schoolwork. She smiled less. She felt safer in silence. Until the juice spilled. It was a quiet Wednesday evening. Chibuzo had stepped out for a quick meeting at the church. Amara was in the kitchen, pouring herself a cup of mango juice. Her hands were tired from homework, her mind heavy. The cup slipped. A splash hit the counter and dripped to the floor. She reached for a rag, but Remy entered first. The woman froze, her eyes scanning the spill. Then, without warning, she grabbed Amara by the arm. Can't you do anything right? Her voice was low, tight. Amara winced. I'm sorry. It was an accident. Slap. The sound cracked the air. Amara's cheek burned instantly. She staggered slightly, but she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood there, still, like the furniture. Remy stepped back and exhaled like nothing happened. Next time, hold the cup properly. You're not 5. She left the kitchen. Amara stood there alone, her face hot, her hands trembling, the juice drying slowly around her feet. A minute passed. Then another. Still no tears. Just that silence again. The kind that wrapped itself around her, like a wet blanket. When Shibuzo returned, he found Amara sitting on the couch, her hands folded over her knees. He ruffled her hair. You good, Ada? Remy stepped in with a smile. She spilled juice earlier, but I corrected her. You know children. She leaned in and kissed Chibuzo on the cheek. He laughed. That's why I need you in this house. Amara blinked once, slowly. The ache behind her eyes threatened to spill. But she held it back. Dinner was served. She ate quietly, bit by bit. Word by word, she disappeared into herself. That night, she didn't sketch. She just held her notebook close, hiding under her blanket. For the first time, she whispered a prayer that wasn't for her grades or her school play. God, please don't let her stay forever. The next morning, Amara woke with a dull ache in her cheek and a sharper one in her heart. She stared at the ceiling as the sun filtered through the curtains. The house was already alive, pots clanking in the kitchen, Remy's voice humming a gospel song. But to Amara, it all felt like background noise in someone else's life. She slid out of bed quietly, her fingers grazing her mother's necklace on the bedside table. She wore it under her uniform, hidden like a secret she couldn't afford to lose. At school, she didn't raise her hand as much. She stopped running during break time. When her class won a quiz competition, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. When her teacher wrote "excellent" on her math paper, she folded it carefully and slipped it into her backpack without showing anyone. At home, she no longer offered to set the table. She didn't chat about her friends. She didn't ask her father about his day. Her world shrank inch by inch behind her eyes. Remy noticed and smiled. Sometimes she would look Amara over like inspecting a shelf. You're quieter these days, she said once, stirring ogbano in the pot. That's good. Well-behaved girls are always quiet. Amara didn't respond. She just wiped the table and left the kitchen. Later that week, she drew a picture of her mother again, seated beneath the orange tree in their compound, her wrapper wrapped around her legs, her smile gentle. She showed it to Remy. The woman laughed. Her head looks like a mango. Amara folded the paper slowly and walked to her room. She didn't cry, but something inside her snapped shut. She stopped drawing for anyone else. She hid her sketchbook under her mattress. She folded her test results into the back of old textbooks. Her words dried up, her light dimmed. But not everyone was blind. That weekend, Uncle Ibuka came to visit, as he often did. He brought fresh oranges from his farm and a nylon bag of homemade chin-chin for Amara. For the brightest girl in this house, he said, grinning. Amara smiled faintly. Thank you, Uncle. She took the chin-chin and disappeared into her room. Later, while Remy and Chibuzo laughed over wedding invitation samples, Ibuka sat with his cousin in the backyard, a cup of kunu in his hand. Buzo, he said slowly, Amara doesn't shine like she used to. Chibuzo looked up, surprised. She's adjusting. It's a big change. Ibuka didn't argue. He just nodded and stared at the orange tree. But in his heart, a seed of doubt had already been planted. Upstairs, Amara sat cross-legged on her bed, sketching her mother again, this time with wings, holding Amara's hand as they flew above the house. In the corner of the page, she drew Remy, small and dark, standing alone in the yard. The wind brushed the curtains softly, and the silence whispered, You're not alone. Someone is starting to see. Not the loud kind that shook rooftops and soaked clothes in seconds. No, this was the quiet kind, a steady drizzle that whispered against the windows, dripping off mango leaves and echoing in the gutters. The kind of rain that made everything feel slower, softer, and heavier. Inside the Obi house, the lights had dimmed. Chibuzo was asleep. Remy had gone to bed early after sipping her chamomile tea and kissing Chibuzo's forehead like the perfect fiancé. Amara lay on her bed, her eyes wide open in the dark. Her red sketchbook sat beside her, closed for once. Her water bottle was empty. Carefully, she slipped out of bed, tiptoeing across the tiled floor. She carried the sketchbook with her, always. Her bare feet made no sound as she padded toward the kitchen. But just as she reached the hallway, she heard a voice. Low, sharp, urgent. She froze. The sound came from the living room. She moved closer, crouching behind the corner where the hallway bent. Her small frame melted into the shadows. Her breath slowed. She peeked just enough to see Remy, standing barefoot in the dark, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was cold now, stripped of its sweetness. Yes, I said after the wedding, she hissed. Phase 2 begins immediately. The payout is clean. And 200 million, tax-free. Amara's heart slammed against her chest. She leaned in closer, holding her sketchbook like a shield. He trusts me, Remy continued. No questions. Honeymoon by boat. Oguta Lake. Perfect place. You know what to do, Martins. Martins. There it was again. Amara clutched the sketchbook tighter. Remy paused, listening. Then she said, Don't call me again unless it's urgent. I'll handle Chibuzo. He's already halfway gone. Gone! The hallway spun. Remy ended the call, dropped the phone on the couch, and exhaled slowly, like a lioness after hunting. Amara backed away slow and silent. Her throat was dry. Her feet felt like stones. She didn't understand everything, but she understood enough. Her father wasn't just in love. He was in danger. By the time she reached her room, her hands were shaking so hard she could barely close the door. She climbed into bed and pulled the blanket over her head. Her mother's necklace pressed against her chest like a warning bell. Her sketchbook lay open now. She picked up her pencil. In the center of the page, she drew Remy, dressed in her wedding gown. But behind her, in the shadows, stood a man with a scar on his cheek and a phone in his hand. Martins. Underneath, Amara wrote, She wants to hurt Papa. I saw it. I heard it. I know. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she didn't sob. She didn't call for help. She just whispered to the ceiling, I won't let her. I won't be quiet. Outside, the rain kept falling. But inside that room, a storm had begun. Morning came, but Amara's eyes hadn't closed. She lay under her blanket, her mother's necklace still around her neck, her sketchbook now tucked beneath her pillow. The house stirred with the usual noise, water splashing in buckets, Remy's humming in the kitchen, Chibuzo's low voice on a phone call. But none of it sounded real anymore. By afternoon, Remy dressed up to meet the event planner at Nsukka Mall. Her perfume floated in the hallway before she left, sugary and sharp. Back soon, she sang, kissing Chibuzo's cheek. I need to finalize the bouquet colors. She didn't notice Amara watching from the stairs, silent as a shadow. When the gate slammed shut, Amara's heart began to pound. Now! She slipped off her slippers and crept toward Remy's bedroom. Her small fingers trembled as she turned the knob. The door creaked faintly. The room smelled like body lotion and danger. Everything was too neat. The shoes lined up like soldiers. The perfume bottles glittered like glass lies. There it was, the silver laptop, sitting on the table like it belonged to the house. Amara sat carefully, wiped her palms on her shorts and opened it. The screen glowed. Password required. She closed her eyes, then typed 0000. Click. It opened. Her breath caught. There were folders, dozens of them. Most were labeled normally, wedding budget, vendor list, songs for ceremony. No, but one folder stood out. Chibuzo_policy_confidential. She clicked it. A scanned document filled the screen. Her father's name, her father's birthday, his job title, beneficiary, Remy Adagoki, sum assured, and 200,000,000. Amara's mouth went dry. Another file, honeymoon accident plan.pdf. She opened it. Flight bookings, boat rental confirmation for Oguta Lake. Notes that read, ensure medication dosage correct, drowsy effect, high probability of fall. Fast but quiet. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the mouse. Then she saw another folder. Photos. She opened it. There were pictures, Remy and a man, hugging, laughing, kissing, standing by a beachside restaurant, lying on a hotel bed. On one photo was scribbled in digital ink, Forever Martins. Martins had a thin scar across his cheek and wore the same red and black beaded bracelet in every photo. They weren't co-workers. They weren't just friends. They were partners, in love and in crime. Amara stared at the screen for one more second. Then she pulled open her sketchbook and carefully tore out the drawing she made the night before. On the back, with small, neat letters, she wrote, "If anything happens to Papa, she did it. Her name is Remy Adegoki. The man is Martins. This is not love." She folded it and slipped it into the white ring box sitting on her dresser. Then she shut the laptop, tiptoed out of the room, and closed the door behind her. Just in time, Remy's heels echoed on the front steps. Her voice floated through the parlor. "I brought Zobo!" Amara scrambled to her desk, sketchbook open, pencil in hand. When Remy peeked into her room, Amara looked up and smiled, just a little. "Good girl," Remy said, then disappeared down the hallway. But in that moment, Amara knew one thing. She had proof. She had a plan. And come the wedding day, she would speak. The church hall was blooming with light. Golden drapes hung from the ceiling like blessings. Fresh white flowers lined the pews. Guests fanned themselves with folded programs, while choir voices floated gently through the speakers. It was the most beautiful wedding Nsukka had seen all year. Outside, cameramen buzzed like bees. Inside, ushers in cream and gold directed latecomers to their seats. The DJ's Afrobeat mix drifted low under the hum of chatter. In the center of it all, Amara stood still, dressed in white satin and lace. Her braids were woven with tiny pearls. Her hands gripped the small white ring box, tighter than ever before. Inside, it wasn't just two gold bands. It was the truth. Chibuzo stood at the altar in a crisp white agbada, his face glowing with pride. His friends grinned from the front row. Aunties wept softly into their gel. Uncle Ibuka sat quietly watching Amara closely. Then the music shifted. The guests turned. The choir rose. And Remy appeared. She floated down the aisle in a flawless ivory gown, lace glimmering with every step. Her veil shimmered like angel wings. Her smile perfect, poised, poisonous. Phones clicked. Gasps of admiration echoed. "She looks like a queen," someone whispered. Chibuzo's eyes lit up. He looked like a man reborn. Amara didn't blink. Her heart beat against her ribs like a warning drum. Beneath the necklace her mother once wore, her chest ached. The moment was here. She could let it go. Stay quiet. Be polite. Or she could speak. Pastor Moses lifted his Bible. "Marriage is a sacred covenant." His voice echoed off the marble. Amara's fingers twitched, a joining of souls under God, where trust, love, and truth. Her vision blurred. "And now, before we proceed to exchange vows, if anyone here has a reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony." Silence. "Speak now, or forever hold your peace." One breath. Two. "Papa." Her voice rang out like a dropped plate. Every head turned. Chibuzo blinked. "Amara?" She stepped forward, her hands trembling, but her voice steady now. "Please don't marry her. She wants to kill you." Gasps. The air broke. Mouths opened. Hands flew to chests. A baby began to cry. "What did she say?" Chibuzo took a step forward, confused. "Amara, what are you talking about?" Amara lifted the ring box. Her voice cracked but kept going. "I heard her. On the phone. With a man named Martins. They planned it after the wedding. She has a file on her laptop. She's not who she says she is." Remy's smile twitched. Her fingers clenched slightly around her bouquet. "She's lying," Remy said sweetly, eyes flicking toward the guests. "She's just scared. This is a lot for her. Losing her mother, and now—" "Check her computer," Amara interrupted. "There's an insurance policy. Her name is on it. And 200 million. She even planned the honeymoon accident. She wrote it." Silence. Then, "I believe her." Uncle Ebuka. He stood slowly. "That girl has been dimming like a lamp for months, but today, she is shining." All eyes turned to Remy. Her mask broke. "Ungrateful little brat," she screamed, tossing the bouquet. "You ruined everything." Pandemonium. Aunties screamed. ushers scrambled. The choir stopped mid-chord. Remy tore off her veil, stormed down the aisle, heels clicking furiously, knocking over a flower stand. She burst through the church doors into the bright Enugu sun and ran. Chibuzo stood frozen. The church was a storm of voices. Then he turned to his daughter. She was still holding the ring box. Tears streaked her cheeks, but she didn't hide. "I tried to tell you," she whispered. And Chibuzo, eyes wide, voice breaking, dropped to his knees and held her. "I'm so sorry, Ada. You saved me." The church was still humming with shock long after Remy, Salome Naji, had vanished into the streets. Chibuzo sat with Amara in the back office, his arms wrapped tightly around her. She leaned against him, her red sketchbook pressed to her chest like a shield. Her hands were still shaking. "I should have seen it," Chibuzo whispered. "I should have listened to you." "I didn't think anyone would believe me," Amara said softly. But someone had, and now there was no turning back. Within 20 minutes, Inspector B.C. Alade and her team arrived from the Nsukka Police Division. Calm, sharp-eyed, and professional, she listened intently as Amara described the overheard call, the laptop, and the plan involving Martins. Chibuzo nodded gravely. "The laptop is in her room." The inspector turned to her team. "Secure it, immediately." By evening, the laptop had been recovered, and everything Amara had described was there. The life insurance policy, the fake honeymoon reservation, the chat logs with Martins Isa, even the folder of photos showing Remy and Martins at a beach resort in Calabar, arms entwined, her head on his chest. In one message, Martins had typed, "Once we cash the payout, I'll get the passports. You meet me at Abalo Express. Nobody will suspect a thing." The wedding had been part of a long con, a performance, a trap. And the girl who seemed invisible had destroyed it. Hours passed. The church was quiet now, but the news had already begun to spread. Guests whispered among themselves outside the gate. Phones buzzed. Aunties crossed themselves and muttered, "I always felt something off about her spirit." Inside the office, Inspector BC placed a firm hand on Chibuzo's shoulder. "We've identified her. Her real name is Salome Naji. She's wanted in Lagos and Benin. This is her third attempt. The last two men weren't as lucky." Chibuzo buried his face in his hands. "I let her into our lives. I ignored the signs. I ignored my own child." Amara looked up at him. "But we're okay now, Papa. That's what matters." He turned to her, his voice cracked but full. "You're braver than I'll ever be." Just then a call came through to Inspector BC's radio. They'd found him. Martins Isa had been arrested at Peace Park bus terminal trying to board a night bus heading toward Calabar. He had a fake ID, N50-000 in crisp notes, and a plastic folder full of counterfeit documents. He confessed within the hour. "She planned it all," he said. "I just followed orders." But they both knew the truth. They were partners. That night, Chibuzo sat on the edge of Amara's bed, the soft whir of the ceiling fan above them. Outside, the rain had stopped. The silence was gentle now, not heavy, but healing. Amara took out a drawing. Her mother seated under the orange tree. Beside her, Amara holding a heart-shaped paper. Above them, the sky sparkled with stars. She handed it to Chibuzo. "For the wall," she said. He took it with trembling fingers, his eyes wet. "She would be so proud of you, Amara." She smiled. For the first time in a long time, it was real. The house on Aid Road, once filled with quiet shadows, now held something new. It wasn't laughter yet, not quite, but it was softer, lighter, like the breeze that drifted through the windows after a long, heavy rain. The morning after the wedding, that never was, Chibuzo stood by the living room window, looking at the chair by the wall, Mama Iyoma's chair. For nearly 2 years it had sat untouched, a sacred reminder of absence. But now he reached for a soft yellow cloth and gently dusted it off. He didn't sit in it. He just stood beside it, breathing in the stillness, letting go of the weight he didn't know he had been carrying. Across the hallway, Amara sat at the dining table, her sketchbook open, her hands moving freely across the page. She was drawing her father, Not in wedding clothes, not in sorrow, but simply sitting on the veranda, a cup of tea in hand, smiling, free. Uncle Ibuka arrived just before noon. He carried a small toolbox and a fresh loaf of agege bread. Came to fix the curtain rail and maybe fix some wounds, he said with a wink. He noticed the difference right away. Chibuzo's eyes were no longer clouded. Amara's posture no longer curled into itself. There was space between them now, but not distance. Just room. Room for healing. They sat under the orange tree in the backyard, sharing boiled ground nuts and ginger drink. The sun peeked out from behind the clouds, curious and kind. I almost lost everything, Chibuzo said. Uncle Ibuka shook his head. You didn't. She saved you. That girl is light. Chibuzo nodded, his voice low. I just wanted to feel normal again. I wanted to stop missing Ioma every time I looked around. I thought, maybe if I moved on, the ache would go away. And instead, Ibuka said gently, you let a mask into your house. Chibuzo covered his face with his hands. I failed her. No, Ibuka replied. You trusted the wrong person. But now trust the right one. That night, as Amara prepared for bed, Chibuzo knocked softly on her door. He entered, holding a small envelope. Your school has a drawing competition, he said. I spoke to the principal. They want you to enter. I already filled the form. Amara's eyes widened. Really? He knelt beside her bed. Really, and I'll help you pick which drawing. If you'll let me. She smiled. Okay. He hugged her, gently but tightly, then pulled something else from his pocket. It was a new sketchbook. On the cover, in gold lettering, it read, To Amara, the girl who sees. Amara touched it with reverence. It's yours, he said. This time let the world see what you've been hiding. Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't sad. They were soft, like her mother's voice, like her father's hand holding hers. She looked up at him. I love you, Papa. And for the first time since Ioma's death, he replied without hesitation. I love you too, my Ada, more than anything. That night, Amara slept soundly. No whispers, no fear, just peace. The necklace around her neck glinted faintly in the moonlight. Outside, the house was still. But inside, the light had returned. 1 year later, Nsukka had moved on. The gossip had faded. The headlines had been replaced. Another wedding had happened at Fountain of Glory Ministries, and no one remembered the scream that once shattered its stillness, except those who had lived through it. But for Amara and Chibuzo, life didn't just return to normal. It became something new. They still lived in the same house on Ada Road. The mango tree still shaded the backyard. Mama Ioma's chair remained in its place by the window. No longer a shrine, but a space where memories could breathe. And every Sunday afternoon, they found their way to the same quiet spot by the river just beyond Peace Park, where the water glimmered and the world slowed down. This Sunday was no different. Amara sat on a woven mat, wearing a lemon-yellow gown that fluttered in the breeze. She dipped roasted yam into spicy palm oil and handed a piece to Chibuzo, who sat beside her, shoeless and smiling. I think you put too much pepper this time, he teased. Maybe you're just getting old, she fired back. They both laughed, light and free. The birds chirped. A breeze rustled the grass. A vendor's canoe drifted past in the distance, and the water sparkled like glass. Chibuzo's phone buzzed. He answered, listening quietly, his expression unreadable. When he ended the call, he turned to Amara. That was Inspector Bisi. Amara's chewing slowed. They caught her, Salome. She was at the Lagos airport trying to board a flight to Senegal with a fake passport. She's in custody now. Amara looked out across the river. She didn't say anything, just nodded slowly. Chibuzo reached for her hand. It's over now, completely. Amara leaned her head on his arm. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of everything they had survived, full of everything they were still becoming. I'm not scared anymore, she said after a while. I know, he replied. I see it in your eyes. She smiled and touched her necklace, her mother's necklace. It had never shone as brightly as it did in that moment. You know, she said, I still dream about Mama. Sometimes she's sitting under the mango tree, humming. Other times she's in my room, just watching me draw. But in the dreams, she never talks. What do you think she would say if she could? Chibuzo asked. Amara thought for a moment, then whispered, she'd say, you did well, my daughter. You saw the truth, and you spoke. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. She would be right. They sat together, watching the river glide by. Eventually, Amara opened her new sketchbook, the one her father gave her months ago, and began to draw. The river, the trees, a man and a girl sitting side by side laughing. Below it, she wrote, truth is heavy, but silence is heavier. Chibuzo smiled. The world didn't need to know what had happened that day in the church, or what nearly did. But they knew, and that was enough. As the sun dipped lower and the sky turned gold, father and daughter stood, packed their mat, and walked back home, side by side, step by step, in the kind of silence that heals.